Her face was blistered and red, right before church. Eleanor Briggs, 74, dabbed her skin in silence. At brunch, her daughter-in-law smirked. It was just a joke. By Tuesday, her entire skincare inventory had been delivered to a homeless shelter labeled "Use with caution." They laughed at her age, her routine, her face. Now their product launch was ruined by the woman they called irrelevant. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The cream smelled faintly of vanilla and lemongrass, clean, almost medicinal. Helen Morris dipped her finger into the jar as the late afternoon light filtered through gauzy kitchen curtains, streaking the counter in gold. She always tested new skincare on the inside of her wrist first, a habit from her nursing days, but this time, maybe it was the way Lindsay had handed her the jar with that rehearsed smile. "Mom, I made this with you in mind. It's our next hero balm. Try it tonight, tell me what you think." Helen hadn't missed the faint sarcasm in the word hero, but she'd accepted the gift anyway, because after all these years, after all the quiet slights and small humiliations, Helen still tried to meet her daughter-in-law halfway. Now, hours later, the balm was spreading across her cheeks in thin, deliberate lines. The mirror above the bathroom sink reflected back a face she barely recognized, flush rising, skin blotching, a rash blooming under the surface like something alive. Her hands trembled as she leaned in. The tingling had started 5 minutes ago. The burning came next. A knock. "Grandma." Clara's voice was soft, hesitant. Helen flinched. "Yes, sweetheart." The door creaked open. Clara stepped inside, iPad still tucked under one arm. She froze mid-step. "Grandma, your cheeks are che," Helen said sharply, a tone she rarely used with her granddaughter. She turned from the mirror and reached for a cool washcloth. "Don't worry, it's just a reaction." Clara stepped closer anyway. Her eyes scanned Helen's face. "That's not just a reaction." Before Helen could respond, Lindsay's voice floated in, bouncing like a ping-pong ball down the hallway. "Hey, did you try the balm yet?" The sound of her heels clicked on the tile as she entered the bathroom without knocking. She took one look at Helen's face and barked out a laugh. "My God, you actually used it?" Helen didn't move, didn't blink. Lindsay leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, perfectly unbothered. "Oops. That was a prank version. Had a little itching powder in it. I told Connor to toss it, but guess it ended up in the wrong jar. Sorry, not sorry." She giggled. "You should have seen your face." Helen didn't speak. She slowly folded the washcloth over, pressing the cool side to her cheek. Clara looked at her mother. "Why would you give her something you couldn't even use yourself?" Lindsay rolled her eyes. "It's called humor. God, lighten up. It's not like it scarred her." "I see," Helen said, her voice even but edged with something ancient and sharp. "And what would the joke have been, had I ended up in urgent care?" "Oh, come on. That balm's basically a mix of shea and almond oil. The powder just itches. It's harmless." Connor appeared in the hallway, sleep still in his eyes, t-shirt wrinkled. "What's going on?" he asked, yawning. "Nothing," Lindsay said breezily. "Mom used the wrong jar. Total accident." Helen turned toward her son, her cheeks now visibly inflamed, blotched red like spilled wine. "She gave me that jar. Personally." Connor sighed. "Let's not make it a thing, okay? Everyone just calm down." Helen looked at him for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. "Fine." She didn't say another word. She left the bathroom, past the linen closet, walked into the guest suite that she kept tidy like a nurse's station, everything folded, everything labeled. She sat at the small writing desk by the window. From the drawer she pulled a Sharpie. From the medicine cabinet, white surgical tape. She placed the jar on the desk and stared at it like it had spoken to her. Then in clean block letters she wrote, "Do not forget this." She taped the label directly over Lindsay's gold foil branding. Then she opened the bottom drawer, pulled out an old wooden jewelry box, clicked the latch open, and laid the jar inside as gently as one might place a relic. She shut the lid, turned the key. The drawer clicked closed. She turned off the light, and didn't speak for the rest of the night. The laughter came before the coffee, bright, shrill, and layered with performative delight, the kind that tried too hard and landed even harder. Helen stood at the kitchen island, slicing strawberries for Clara's oatmeal, her movements slow but precise, every motion a tether to dignity. Through the open archway into the dining room, she heard Lindsay's voice rise above the clatter of mimosa glasses and avocado toast. So she actually used it, Lindsay said, drawing out the word like it was candy on her tongue. Red splotches, full-on rash, the whole deal. I thought she was going to call 911. Another round of laughter. A woman chimed in, "No, Lindsay, you didn't." "I did. I mean, come on. It was obviously prank jar. I left it right next to the real one. She's just too intense sometimes. She takes herself way too seriously." Helen paused with the knife in midair. A single slice of strawberry, too thin, stuck to the blade, like flesh. Her face still healing, still pink, warmed again, but not from memory. This time it was something cooler. Anger sharpened into clarity. "She's your mother-in-law, right?" One of the brunch guests asked through a cackle. Lindsay didn't miss a beat. "Technically. But like we're from two different planets. Her idea of skincare is soap, a wet cloth, and judgment." Helen didn't enter the room. She didn't defend herself. She turned off the stove, wiped her hands on a tea towel, and walked past them without a glance. The sound of her slippers on the hardwood floor was the only acknowledgement she gave them. Clara, from her spot curled up near the front hallway with her phone and sketch pad, looked up as Helen passed. Her eyes narrowed. She tapped her screen, then pressed record. "Get this," Lindsay continued, her voice now dipping into stage whisper. "When I told her it was a joke, she just stared at me like I'd slapped a nun." Laughter erupted again. That afternoon, Clara padded into the guest suite, where Helen sat with a cool compress resting across her neck and an herbal tea steaming by her elbow. Clara knelt beside the armchair and held up her phone. "I thought you'd want to hear this," she said simply. Helen didn't say anything while the audio played. Not during the laughter. Not when Lindsay mocked her tone. Not even when someone joked, "Well, at least her pores are open now." When the clip ended, Helen clicked the screen off herself. "Save that," she murmured. Then she rose, walked over to the corner bookshelf, and pulled out a thick, weathered logbook, leather-bound, spine cracked. The kind nurses used before digital records replaced handwriting. A relic from her earlier life, filled with patient names, vitals, allergies, dosages. But today it would serve a different purpose. She sat at the writing desk, opened to a fresh page, and wrote in block capitals, "Test reactions, Lindsay Morris products." She began cataloging ingredients from the balm's label, then cross-referenced them with known irritants and preservatives she remembered from the ER. Her hand moved like muscle memory, years of triage documentation waking up inside her. It didn't take long to notice discrepancies. She jotted notes beside the ingredient list. Claims colloidal oat, smells synthetic, no standard emulsifier listed. Inconsistent with shelf life claims. She flipped to a second page, started again. By the third product, she realized some names were being misused, clever sounding but chemically incorrect, dangerous if paired wrong, deliberately misleading if sold in volume. Later that evening, Connor stopped by with a bottle of wine and an awkward smile. "Hey, heard things got out of hand earlier." Helen didn't look up from the logbook. "I see." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, Lindsay, she jokes too much sometimes. But it's not that deep. Can't we all just move on?" Helen closed the book with a soft thud, and finally met his gaze. "You're asking the person who was burned to comfort the person holding the match." Connor's mouth opened, then closed. He sighed. "You know I hate conflict. You know I hate pain," she replied, rising. Connor stepped back. "All right, you win. Just don't do anything dramatic." "Okay." Helen didn't answer. She waited until the front door clicked shut. Then she reached for her phone and dialed a number from memory. "Bridget," she said when the call picked up, her voice low, deliberate. "Do you accept skincare donations at the shelter?" There was a pause. "Always," Bridget replied. "Why? You have some to give." Helen stared at the balm jar still locked away in the drawer. Her lips curved upward, not into a smile, but into something colder. "Oh yes," she said. "Plenty." The guest suite smelled like rosehip oil and plastic. Helen stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, scanning the shelves like a nurse assessing triage patients. Jars and tubes crowded every surface, some half open, some leaking, a few still sealed in thick, shiny PR packaging. They sat there like offerings, but none of them were meant for her. They were overflow from Lindsay's beauty empire, product trials, influencer samples, rejected prototypes, forgotten rebrands. She stepped forward and picked up a glass jar. The label curled at the edges, the print faint from age. She unscrewed the lid and brought it to her nose, rancid sour, like spoiled almonds left in a hot car. Clara entered behind her, holding a roll of packing tape and a flattened cardboard box. "There's more in the closet and under the guest bed." She dropped to her knees and tugged out a bin. "She doesn't even track half of this." Helen nodded slowly. "Good." They worked in silence at first. Helen opening, inspecting, setting aside. Clara assembling boxes, folding and pressing the seams like origami. The process felt almost surgical. One jar had a cracked lid and dried product caked around the rim. Another had an expiration date that read 03/24 in fine print beneath the minimalist branding. Helen scribbled "expired, use with caution" on a sticky note and pressed it to the lid. "Grandma," Clara said, holding up a serum with glitter suspended in amber liquid. "She says this one's anti-inflammatory." Helen turned it over in her hand. "No preservative listed. That shimmer? It's mica. It irritates more skin than it helps." She tossed it gently into the donation box, where dozens more sat waiting. By mid-afternoon, 3 boxes were full. All sealed, labeled, categorized. Helen's handwriting adorned each product. "May separate under heat. Patch test advised. Not safe for broken skin." They loaded the boxes into the back of Helen's hatchback. The trunk clicked shut, a clean, decisive sound. Bridget met them at the shelter loading dock, clipboard in hand, dressed in jeans and a black t-shirt that read "Compassion isn't charity." Bridget eyed the stack with a raised brow. "That's a lot of balm." "Not balm," Helen said. "Recklessness." "Repackage." Bridget opened a box and scanned a few items. She pulled out a cream and read Helen's handwritten label aloud. "Tested on no one. Marketed to everyone." "That's poetry," Bridget muttered, half amused, half horrified. "We'll use what's safe, but we'll be honest. Always." "I'll do the labeling myself," Helen said. "If I give these to women trying to heal, they deserve clarity." Bridget nodded. "Then we're in agreement." That night, after dropping Clara off at her school art club and returning home, Helen brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat down at her writing desk. She picked up the last remaining product from Lindsay's Hero line. It was in a sleek bottle, all matte black and gold leaf. On the back, "Your skin deserves the future." Helen turned the bottle slowly in her fingers. Lindsay had posted the campaign for this one last month. Glossy video, gauzy filters, her voiceover saying, "Don't listen to the critics. Gen Z skin and boomer skin just need different routines." Helen had felt the sting then but said nothing. Now the sting had passed. What remained was focus. She peeled off the label. It came off in a single clean ribbon. Beneath the branding, the bottle was just another cheap cylinder. Mass-produced, soulless. Upstairs, a notification pinged on Clara's iPad. Helen looked over as the screen lit up with a new post at Lindsay Glow. "Oops, another generational skin mistake. My Mill used her old cold cream, like it was 1991. The caption ended with a laughing emoji. Helen leaned forward, pulled a pad of sticky notes from the drawer, and wrote slowly, her handwriting deliberate and even for women who deserve care. "Not cruelty. She peeled the note and pressed it to the final box. Then she shut the lid gently. Finally. The silence in the guest bathroom was so crisp it felt staged like a hotel room before the guests arrived. Lindsay stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, the other scrolling through her phone as she glanced up at the bare acrylic shelf mounted above the towel rack. "Connor?" she called out, voice echoing lightly against the white tile. "Have you seen the product shelf in here?" From the hallway, a half-interested mumble. "What?" "The shelf. The one with the trial sets and mini jars. It's totally cleared out." She stepped inside, opened the mirrored cabinet. Empty, no testers, no pipettes, not even her usual clutter of eye cream spatulas or jade rollers. Connor walked into view, dragging socked feet across the floor. "I don't know, maybe Clara moved it for her art stuff?" Lindsay narrowed her eyes. "She wouldn't. That's my active shelf. Half that stuff hasn't even launched yet." He shrugged, already losing interest. "Maybe the housekeeper tidied. We haven't had her in since last Tuesday." "Well," he said, retreating, "then it's a mystery." Lindsay stared at the gleaming shelf, completely stripped. Not a trace of residue. Not even a fingerprint. She tapped a quick note into her phone. "Bathroom shelf. Missing. Ask Mom." Downstairs, Helen was replacing that very shelf, but with something else entirely. Neatly arranged rows of unscented lotion, chamomile oil, and calendula balm now stood in the bathroom cabinet of her suite. None of them bore Lindsay's brand. Helen had selected each one with care. Some handmade, others purchased from small verified producers she'd known for years. All safe. All simple. None glamorized. She folded the last washcloth, set it by the new products, and stepped back. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and honey, not artificial, but lived in, clean. Later that afternoon, Clara played her part with quiet precision. She sat on the stairs, sketching in a spiral notebook when Lindsay approached. "Sweetie," Lindsay asked, "have you seen my shelf stuff?" From the guest bath. Clara didn't look up. "Shelf stuff, yeah. The PR samples and test kits that were on the wall rack." Clara tilted her head, feigning thought. "Oh, I just saw bottles. Grandma had some out. Maybe she moved things when she cleaned." Lindsay pressed her lips together. "I see." Clara smiled, perfectly innocent. "Want me to help you look?" "No," Lindsay said tightly. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Upstairs, Helen was already loading 3 sealed boxes into the trunk of her car. The handwritten labels were affixed to each lid, her penmanship steady, "Donated by request. Gentle use advised." Each item inside had been checked, cleaned, and categorized. Dangerous products were disposed of. Borderline items were stripped of Lindsay's branding and relabeled with simple usage notes. Bridget had given her full discretion. "If you're doing this, do it your way." At the shelter, Bridget met her at the door, with gloves on and a clipboard in hand. Volunteers buzzed around, sorting clothing and dry goods, but they made space immediately for Helen's boxes. "These are beautiful," Bridget murmured, scanning a label. "Soothing formula. May be unstable above 75 degrees. You didn't miss a thing. They deserve honesty," Helen said. She handed over the final box. Inside, folded neatly atop the jars, was a cream-colored envelope containing a note written in blue ink, "From a woman who knows what healing should feel like." Back at home that evening, Helen sat with a cup of green tea while Clara curled beside her, watching a design video on her iPad. The room was warm, quiet, peaceful. Across town, the shelter's Instagram posted a photo of the donation table. The caption read, "Generosity you can feel. Thank you to the anonymous donor of today's skincare collection. These women see your care." The post gained traction quickly. And then came the comment at Monicate Beauty. "Wait, isn't that Lindsay's label?" Helen set her teacup down without a sound. Clara looked over. Helen didn't speak, but her eyes, sharp, aware, never left the screen. Lindsay uploaded the reel on a Wednesday morning, bright, glossy, and perfectly edited. The first frame was a cartoonish animation of Helen's face, exaggerated with blotchy red cheeks and a shocked expression. A goofy sound effect played as fake balm smeared across digital skin. Then Lindsay's voice cut in, syrupy and cheerful. So, once upon a time, I gave my MNL the wrong jar of balm, and she freaked out, like red alert, end of days level drama. But it was just a teeny tiny prank. Guys, it was literally itching powder. The caption read, when your MNL confuses skincare with war paint #boomer burn #founder fails. The video racked up views fast. Hearts, laughing emojis, even brands commenting stop we're screaming. Helen saw it while folding Clara's laundry. Her hands paused mid-sleeve. She turned the phone so Clara could see the screen. The girl's brows pulled together. Then she quietly walked over to her backpack, pulled out her phone, and tapped through her camera roll. I still have the full audio, Clara said softly. From brunch. Helen nodded once. Send it. Not an hour later her phone vibrated again, this time with a private message from Monica Tate. Monica Beauty. Helen, just saw Lindsay's is that real? Helen replied with a voice memo. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Lindsay's voice rang out clearly, laughing over brunch. I mean, she looked like a tomato. But whatever, now it's viral gold. Probably our best unintentional brand moment yet. There was a pause, and then a second message. Monica Beauty. I've been waiting for something real. This is enough. By Friday morning, Monica's blog post dropped. When beauty burns the dark side of glow culture. Is this the kind of founder you want touching your face? The piece opened with screenshots from the reel, followed by the audio transcript. Monica didn't editorialize. She didn't need to. The facts stung enough. The comments section exploded before noon. Helen sat at her kitchen table, sipping black coffee, Clara across from her reading aloud. She laughed about her MNL's skin literally blistering. This isn't edgy. This is cruel. Just lost all interest in Lindsay Glow. Disgusting. Meanwhile Lindsay went live. She wore a gray hoodie. No makeup. Her I'm just being real uniform. She wiped at imaginary tears and stared into the camera with glassy eyes. This is a targeted attack. Someone took a joke and twisted it. I love my family. I would never intentionally hurt anyone. That audio? It's been edited. Helen didn't blink. She reached across the table and touched Clara's hand. Show them the real version. Clara pulled up the video, time-stamped. Full reel, brunch room ambience in the background. No cuts, no effects. She posted it to her private account with a single line. Here's the full story. Judge for yourself. Within hours it was everywhere. Twitter, Reddit threads, niche beauty forums. People weren't shouting. They were watching, sharing, whispering. That night, Helen returned to the guest suite. She opened the locked drawer and pulled out the original prank jar, set it gently on the desk, looked at it like a forensic artifact. She was halfway through writing a new log entry when the doorbell rang. Connor answered it. A courier in a branded fleece jacket handed him a flat envelope. For Helen Morris, the man said. Signature required. Helen emerged from the hallway, took the clipboard without a word and signed. Back in the suite, she peeled open the flap and removed a tri-folded letter, printed on heavy cream-colored paper. The letterhead read, Lindsay Morris Public Relations, Formal Notice. It was a cease and desist. Helen smiled. Quiet, restrained, almost amused. Her silence had gone viral. Now her pain had a paper trail. The letter trembled slightly in Helen's hands, not because she was afraid, but because the weight of its arrogance felt heavier than ink and paper should allow. She sat at Bridget's kitchen table, the late afternoon sun filtering through gauzy curtains, throwing soft lines across the oak surface. Clara perched quietly beside her, arms folded, eyes sharp. A ceramic teapot steamed between them, untouched. Helen cleared her throat and began to read aloud, her voice even, unwavering. To Miss Helen Morris, your public engagement in defamatory speech concerning the Lindsay Glow brand has resulted in quantifiable reputational harm. This is a formal request that you immediately cease and desist all communications, digital, print, or verbal, that negatively reference Miss Morris or her affiliated business entities. Clara snorted. Bridget didn't even try to hide her eye roll. Helen kept reading, calm as ever, even when the letter accused her of malicious interference with business and intentional misrepresentation. By the time she finished, Bridget was leaning back in her chair, arms crossed. "That's not a cease and desist," Bridget said. "That's a tantrum on letterhead." Helen folded the paper neatly, smoothing each crease. "I thought so." Bridget reached for the teapot and poured slowly. "She really thinks she can threaten a retired nurse with a clipboard and a conscience." "I'm not angry," Helen said. "I'm methodical." Clara grinned. "That should be on your tombstone." Later that evening, Monica Tate released a follow-up blog post that began with a single sentence in bold: "Whistleblowers aren't enemies, they're customers who paid in dignity." She included an excerpt from the cease and desist, followed by a breakdown of Helen's version of events, supported with audio, timestamps, product images, and an annotated timeline. Monica didn't editorialize. Again, she didn't need to. The internet handled that for her. Comments poured in like a tide. "This is what happens when founders treat ethics like branding. You bullied your MAL on camera, and now you're shocked she's not invisible. Legal threats don't cover up moldy moisturizer." Helen, meanwhile, sat in her suite, drafting her own letter, not defensive, not emotional, just factual. She wrote it by hand first, then typed it up. She attached scanned copies of her labeled donations, the product discrepancies she'd logged in her nurse's notebook, and screenshots from her own email correspondence with Lindsay's vendors from months past, back when Lindsay still asked for her advice. When Helen was still useful, she CC'd the shelter's board. She addressed it to Lindsay's PR firm. It ended simply: "If your concern is public clarity, this letter will serve that purpose more thoroughly than your legal threat ever could." By Friday, Monica called again, this time with a new voice on the line. "Helen, meet Gwen," Monica said. "She's local counsel. Teaches part-time at the college. She read your case and wanted to speak." Gwen's voice came through strong and no nonsense. "Miss Morris, I'm a licensed attorney and a domestic abuse survivor. What you're doing is quiet public justice. If she comes after you legally, I will represent you pro bono." Helen blinked. "Why?" "Because silencing survivors of cruelty, verbal, emotional, physical, is how this kind of damage spreads. You're not the first woman someone tried to embarrass for aging. You might be the first to answer with service instead of silence." Helen stared at the letter again, then slipped it into the firebox under her desk. She didn't need it anymore. Across town, Lindsay wasn't retreating. She went on a live stream that Saturday in a full face of makeup, hair curled, voice shaking with performative disbelief. "I'm being attacked by a bitter ex-nurse with dry skin and an online army of haters. I built something from nothing. She's trying to burn it down." Helen saw the clip on Clara's phone. She didn't react, just leaned over, reached for her salve, and rubbed it gently into her cheeks. No redness, no sting, no need for commentary. But Monica wasn't done. Her inbox pinged late Sunday night with a new anonymous tip. The subject line read, "Lindsay Glow's ingredient sourcing, origin inside export logs, supplier names, and 3 scanned letters from a regulatory board in Europe. All flagged the same thing. Lindsay was sourcing ingredients from a banned distributor, blacklisted for safety violations and false certifications." Monica called Helen. "Someone just opened a bigger door," she whispered. "You ready to walk through it?" Helen didn't hesitate. "I'm already standing inside." Helen didn't mean to spy. She meant to dust. That's what she told herself as her fingers hovered over the trackpad of Clara's open laptop. The guest suite was quiet, save for the low hum of cicadas outside the window and the rhythmic tick of the wall clock. Clara had gone to grab her sketchbook, leaving the screen lit with a spreadsheet and an open email chain. Helen squinted, then leaned in. The emails were from a supplier called Truewell Botanicals Asia, a name Helen didn't recognize. But what caught her eye was the subject line, "Re-COA edit request. Do not forward." She clicked it. The email thread was brief but damning. Lindsay's assistant had asked for a new certificate of analysis to be issued, with altered numbers. We just need it to reflect a more stable pH, the message read. Our founder doesn't want the lab liability clause printed on this one. Helen didn't breathe for a moment. She clicked into the next folder Clara had opened, screenshots of product labels, pulled directly from Lindsay's press kits. One serum claimed to contain clinical-grade bakuchiol, another derm-tested, zero allergen formula. But the emails told another story. Unstable oils, ignored recall notices, substitutions from uncertified factories. Helen's stomach turned. Clara returned, saw her grandmother's expression, and sat down slowly. I figured you'd want to see it before Mom wipes her tracks. Helen didn't respond. She just began forwarding each file to Monica. By dusk, Monica replied with an address and 2 words, "Meet me." The lab was hidden behind an old industrial building on the edge of Asheville, inside a converted shipping container painted a soft gray. Inside, everything gleamed. Steel counters, backlit drying racks, refrigeration units marked with color-coded tape. The air was cool and clean, tinged with the faint scent of rubbing alcohol and lavender extract. Monica stood near a wide sink, arms folded, her phone clutched tight. "Helen, this is Dr. Evelyn Carter. She used to run compliance testing for the FDA." Evelyn, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, sleeves rolled, offered a firm handshake. "Let's see what your daughter-in-law's hiding in those jars." Helen opened the tote bag she'd brought. One by one, she placed jars and tubes onto the stainless steel table. Evelyn peeled back seals, sniffed, checked textures, ran tiny pipettes through mobile assay strips. With each product, her brows knit tighter. "Here," she finally said, tapping a white serum bottle. "This label says F balanced for sensitive skin. Actual pH is off by nearly 2 points. That can strip skin. This other one preservative-free but stable. There's no possible way that claim holds if this was shipped in summer." Monica recorded everything. No narration. Just Evelyn's calm, steady voice, describing violations in language even a casual viewer could understand. "She cut corners," Evelyn concluded. "Not just in production, at the source. These oils weren't properly filtered. There's oxidation. It's not just irresponsible. It's dangerous." Helen pressed her lips together. She built a brand around purity and lied in every direction. Evelyn gently wiped her hands. "I've audited CEOs who broke FDA rules to save time, but they usually at least tested their own products. You know what's most telling here?" Helen shook her head. She didn't even bother. That night, Helen and Clara sat in the kitchen. A storm rolled low outside, distant thunder rumbling like a warning. Clara stirred honey into a mug of tea, watching it dissolve. "She never tried them," she said softly. "Not even once. She pretends to apply them on camera, then wipes it off with micellar water between takes." Helen nodded slowly. "That tells you everything." Clara looked at her, something like awe in her eyes. "I don't think she ever expected you to fight back." "I'm not fighting," Helen said. "I'm clarifying." The next morning, Monica emailed a draft. Subject: official complaint, product mislabeling and certification fraud to State Consumer Safety Board. The document was airtight. Exhibits included altered certificates, emails, timestamps, and Evelyn Carter's full lab report. Near the end, one bolded line stood out. Primary witness Helen Morris, RN, Retburs, Asheville, North Carolina. Helen scrolled to the bottom, paused and typed a single word. Approved. Lindsay stood in front of the ring light, holding a frosted glass jar between 2 manicured fingers, like it was made of gold. The words "Glow Revival" shimmered across the lid in iridescent script. Behind her, a background screen looped a slow-motion video of orange blossoms unfurling. "This," she whispered to her audience of thousands, "is a new beginning." She never said the formula was the same. She never had to. Online, her followers hit the pre-order button in droves. Influencers unboxed branded mailers, with handwritten notes and pink crinkle paper. The campaign hashtag, #ReviveWithGlow, began to trend regionally. But 3 days later, the trouble started. Orders stalled. Customers posted screenshots of tracking numbers that returned nothing. A TikTok reviewer stitched one of Lindsay's videos with a blunt caption, "It's been 11 days. Where's my skin miracle?" In a now-deleted story, Lindsay blamed a targeted hack by a competitor, then pivoted, "We're switching fulfillment partners for your safety and our peace of mind." The truth was far less curated. Monica's latest blog post had named Lindsay's fulfillment company directly. The piece, titled "When Clean Beauty Isn't Clean Enough," cited the forged documents and untested batches. Someone at the company saw it. Someone who didn't want to be on the wrong side of an audit. That same day, they paused all pending orders. Meanwhile, Helen was preparing her 6th donation box. In the guest suite, Clara knelt beside her, folding old bath towels around the jars to prevent shifting in transit. The air smelled like lavender, beeswax, and the faint tang of rubbing alcohol. Each item had been checked, wiped down, and relabeled in Helen's script, "Safe for sensitive skin. Do not ingest. Store below 78 degrees Fahrenheit." They worked like a team, like a ritual. "Do you want me to print more labels?" Clara asked. Helen shook her head. "Handwritten matters." The next morning, they loaded the box into Helen's trunk. At the shelter, Bridget greeted them at the curb, clipboard in hand and eyes soft with pride. "We've started a new inventory room just for these," she said. "And we're putting this up today." She handed Helen a brushed metal plaque, warm from the sun. The engraving read, "From a woman who knew better." Helen traced the words with her fingertips. "It's not about me." Bridget tilted her head. "It never was." They mounted the plaque beside the shelter's skincare cabinet, where dozens of donated jars now lined the shelves in neat rows, each bearing Helen's quiet handwriting. Across the city, a dozen Lindsay Glow customers opened empty mailboxes. Back online, Lindsay's spiral had begun. She posted a new reel, panicked but polished. "We're experiencing tech issues and outside interference. The truth is, we're being harassed by a coordinated smear campaign from anonymous trolls." Clara watched it unfold from the living room couch. "She means you," she said, smirking at her grandmother. Helen was applying balm to the inside of her wrist, checking for texture and temperature. "Let her think it." Lindsay filed a formal takedown request against Monica's blog. It was denied. 3 hours later, she filed another. Also denied. Then a third, this time against the shelter's Instagram post, showcasing donated products and the newly mounted plaque. Still denied. That evening, Helen returned home to find a single text from Gwen. "Gwen, just got off a call. State Board is opening a formal ethics inquiry into her business license." Helen read it 3 times, then set her phone down on the kitchen counter. The kettle began to hiss behind her. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She just turned off the stove, poured the water into a teacup, and carried it to the back porch. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Across town, another shipment sat in a warehouse, unopened, unmoved, unwanted. The porch was quiet, save for the creak of wicker under Helen's chair and the soft chirp of crickets waking early in the shade. Late afternoon light filtered through the trees, warm but not glaring, casting long golden stripes across the wood planks. Clara perched on the swing, knees tucked under her, phone in hand, not for distraction but for backup. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The tripod stood facing Helen. Behind it, Monica adjusted her mic. One last check of levels and framing. Her energy was different today. Gentler, more reverent, like she knew she wasn't just getting a quote. She was bearing witness. "You sure about this?" Monica asked, lifting her eyes over the lens. Helen glanced toward Clara. The girl gave a single nod, subtle and strong. "I'm not here to get even," Helen said, smoothing the hem of her cardigan. "I'm here to tell the part that hasn't been dressed in filters." Monica hit record. No dramatic opener, no music, no lower thirds cluttering the screen. Just Helen, in soft afternoon light, a mug of tea steaming beside her, and her voice clear, calm, without rehearsed righteousness. "It wasn't the product that burned," she said. "It was how easy it was for her to find it funny." She didn't name Lindsay. She didn't have to. She laughed while I stood in the mirror wondering if I'd have scarring. She posted reels. She called it edgy. I started writing things down, not because I wanted to retaliate, but because I wanted to remember. Every patient I cared for in my career came in with something they were told to forget. I never wanted to forget this. She paused only once, to sip her tea. The breeze lifted a wisp of her silver hair across her cheek. Monica kept rolling. No questions, no interruptions. She used skincare to brand herself. Helen continued. I used it to survive grief, to feel like my face belonged to me after the world changed. That's not generational. That's human. They titled the video Kindness Isn't Fragile. It went live the next morning. By noon it had over 60,000 views. By nightfall, that number tripled. It wasn't just the content, it was the restraint. No bitterness, no dragging, no cancel call. Just truth in its rawest form, shared with the cadence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to reclaim. Comments began pouring in. There's power in how quiet she is. I didn't even know this story, but now I'm crying at my desk. We've heard hers. We believe the woman with the burns. This is what dignity looks like when it fights back. Lindsay responded within hours. She had to. Her video was a cascade of soft focus apologies and faux vulnerability. Eyes glassy, background white and minimalist. She dabbed at a dry corner of her eye with a tissue as she choked out. I never meant to hurt anyone. My mill just misinterpreted a joke. The internet twisted it. She blamed Monica. She hinted that Helen had been deeply bitter ever since the family dynamic shifted. She even leaned into the trend of public redemption, framing herself as a woman under attack by ageism critics and cancel culture bullies. But the comments told a different story. You mocked her. On video. More than once. It's not that deep. It's not that forgivable either. Why did she need to be humiliated for your brand to rise? No more codes. No more jars. We're done. Clara watched the fallout from her laptop, legs crossed on the porch steps. Helen sat behind her, knitting in silence. They didn't refresh the screen. They didn't need to. The verdict was already clear. Not through shouting, through shifting, through quiet solidarity. The community had spoken, and this time Helen was the face they were listening to. The invitation arrived in a glossy lavender envelope, sealed with a wax stamp pressed into gold foil. Helen held it between her fingers like a lab sample, something pretty concealing something dangerous. The words "You're cordially invited to the Lindsay Glow redemption launch" shimmered across the card in a champagne script. Clara opened it for her. She didn't smile. She even invited the shelter, she muttered, pulling out the RSVP insert. It's catered with live music. They're doing a signature mocktail called Forgive and Glow. Helen raised an eyebrow. Did she send one to Monica too? She did, Clara said. And the press. And the local news. It's not a launch. It's an apology in highlighter. The invitation sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before Helen quietly placed it in the compost bin. She wants your attention, Clara said. Not your presence. Launch day arrived in a burst of Carolina sunlight and humid air. The venue was a renovated greenhouse in the Asheville Arboretum, glass walls, lush ferns, and uplit floral arches, framing a small runway. A tower of cream-colored boxes, labeled the Redemption Line, sat untouched near the entryway. Lindsay stood at the door in heels that pinched, and a silk jumpsuit that wouldn't stop clinging. Her smile was locked in place, eyes darting to the clock, then the door, then her phone. No Monica, no shelter staff, no influencers. Only 5 people showed. 3 were vendors looking for payment. 1 was a cousin she hadn't spoken to in years. The last was her assistant, who arrived an hour late and left 15 minutes early. Lindsay posed anyway, arms raised, lips parted, body turned slightly sideways, like she was still being watched. A photographer snapped a dozen shots. She posted the best one with the caption, "Grateful for those who showed up when it mattered most. Onward." Across town, Monica was at the shelter, filming a quiet interview with Bridget beneath the new cabinet plaque. Helen was there too, off camera, folding product inserts and helping label new arrivals. Clara was organizing the donated shelf, lining up jars with a precision Helen recognized from her old hospital days. Monica snapped a photo of the nearly empty venue from a forwarded group chat, then posted it to her own account with a single caption: "Integrity shows up even when no one else does." It spread like dry grass in August. Lindsay tried to pivot. She went live again, voice tight, background blurred. "There's been a targeted smear campaign. Someone very close to me, someone I loved, has orchestrated this. But I forgive them. I forgive all of you." She dabbed the corner of one dry eye with a tissue, but no one reposted. No one defended her. Even the brand's own account stayed silent. That evening, Helen sat on the back porch, a bowl of rosemary hand salve resting on the small side table, her fingers gently massaging it into her palms. The night air smelled of honeysuckle and rain-soaked wood. From the kitchen came the distant sound of Clara humming. Her phone buzzed once on the armrest. A message from Bridget. Shelter board vote. Unanimous approval subject. Grant naming confirmation message. The Helen Morris Resilience Fund is official. First round of recipients to be announced next quarter. Congratulations, asterisk asterisk. Helen read it once, then again. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. She just looked at the stars and let the wind carry the silence. The announcement came not with applause, but with reverent stillness. In the newly renovated community hall of the Asheville Women's Shelter, under strings of soft Edison bulbs and walls lined with framed portraits of survivors turned advocates, Bridget stepped onto the modest stage and adjusted the mic. "We honor a woman today who never asked to be honored," she began, voice low, unwavering. She did not seek credit. She sought care. And because of her, others will now have both. Clara stood just behind her, clutching a cream envelope and wearing a blazer one size too big. Helen sat 3 rows back, flanked by shelter staff and quiet onlookers. She wore gray linen and a brooch that used to be her mother's. She had not told anyone what the day meant to her. Not directly. She didn't need to. Bridget continued. "It is my privilege to formally announce the Helen Morris Resilience Fund, created to support women re-entering the wellness workforce. This is not charity. It is a recognition of skill, strength, and the healing hands so many of these women already carry." Soft applause filled the room, and the first recipient, Bridget added, is a woman who survived far more than anyone should be asked to survive, who now trains as a certified esthetician and plans to open a trauma-informed skincare practice for survivors like her. A tall woman in a teal headscarf approached the stage with slow steps and wet eyes. Helen stood, so did Clara. Clara handed her the envelope, and together they gave it to the recipient. No speeches, just a steady handshake, a shared nod, and the echo of resilience stretching far beyond the moment. Monica's write-up appeared in the Asheville Voice the next morning. The headline read, "The Face of Dignity: How One Woman Quietly Redefined Beauty Culture in Her Own Backyard." It wasn't just about the fund. It was about pattern and patience, about how Helen had turned cruelty into care and silence into service. Monica detailed the donation process, the reformulated products, and even quoted a line from Helen's interview: "I didn't retaliate. I redirected." The piece ended with a photo of Helen from behind on her porch swing, holding a jar labeled Quiet Bloom in her lap. 3 states away, Gwen printed the article and brought it into her ethics seminar. She stood at the lectern, tapped the desk lightly, and held up the printout. "This is what justice looks like when it doesn't try to look like justice," she said. "This is repair, restoration, resistance dressed in decency." Students scribbled notes. One asked if it was real. Gwen smiled. "I know her. It's very real." Later that afternoon, Connor pulled into Helen's driveway. He walked slowly up the porch steps, holding the paper folded under one arm. Helen was pruning the rosemary planter, dirt beneath her fingernails, a pair of shears resting beside her tea mug. He stood for a moment, unsure of how to begin. Then he simply said, "I had no idea." She glanced up, expression unreadable. That, she said, was the problem. He didn't respond, just sat down on the step beside her. For once he didn't try to fix it, he just stayed. At a co-working space downtown, Lindsay burst through the glass doors of her accountant's office, her phone shaking in her hand. "There's a letter," she snapped. "From the IRS." Her assistant trailed behind her, pale. "Did you read it?" "They're auditing me," Lindsay said. "For the past 4 years." She slapped the letter on the desk. Her voice cracked on the next words. Someone tipped them off. The accountant picked up the envelope, eyes narrowing as he scanned the sender's information. "Not someone," he said. "It's signed as a whistleblower." Lindsay froze, and for the first time in months she said nothing at all. The first cancellation came on a Sunday morning. Lindsay didn't notice until noon. She opened her email with coffee in hand, still in silk pajamas, sun beaming through the window like it hadn't read the headlines. There was a flagged message from her fulfillment platform. Subject: urgent action required. Chargeback activity exceeds threshold. She blinked, clicked, scanned the message twice. 12 clients had reversed their charges overnight. 10 more followed by evening. One message stood out, typed in all caps. "You humiliated your own mother-in-law. Never again." She stared at it so long she forgot to drink her coffee. By Monday morning, the Shopify backend had locked her out. All product listings had been suspended pending customer safety review. The irony wasn't lost on her. By Tuesday, her email list, a cultivated garden of brand loyalists, influencers, and discount code users, had dropped by 80%. Lindsay Glow wasn't just bleeding, it was hemorrhaging. Across town, in a sun-dappled kitchen that smelled faintly of calendula and lemon balm, Helen was spreading thick salve into a line of amber jars. The batch was labeled Gentle Courage, and each one was spoken for before it cooled. She didn't sell them. She gave them away. By request and only to those who asked with sincerity. No branding, no hashtags, just healing, passed hand to hand. Clara sat nearby, writing out shipping labels by hand. "Do you want me to create a website?" Helen shook her head. "A website can crash. A jar with your name on it can't be ignored." Bridget stopped by that afternoon to deliver tea and sit a while. She picked up one of the jars, turning it slowly in her fingers. "She sold beauty," Bridget said. "You gave it back." Helen didn't look up from the next label. "She sold performance." Bridget smiled. "You're right, you gave back truth." Meanwhile, Lindsay sat in her downtown office, once a minimalist showroom with curated lighting and acrylic shelves, now filled with half-packed boxes and unpaid invoices. Her phone buzzed again. Another refund request. Another comment tagged fraud. Another Instagram DM demanding she do better or disappear. She opened the latest one and flinched. It was a screenshot from the shelter's Instagram page. A jar she had designed. A label in Helen's handwriting. The caption read, "Donated with care, repurposed with honesty." Beneath it, a flood of comments. "This is what it should have been from the beginning. No branding, just balm. That's how you know it's real. You tried to bury her. She made medicine from the dirt." Lindsay hurled her phone across the room. It cracked against the glass of a framed press feature from 2 years ago. The new face of ethical beauty. The irony shattered louder than the glass. By Thursday, Lindsay's brand partners had gone silent. One by one, affiliate links went dark. Influencers removed tags, wiped reels. The once constant hum of praise had faded into a vacuum, and in that quiet, Monica's email arrived. It was short, unembellished. "Per your inquiry, we've confirmed the following. Lindsay Glow's license has been formally suspended, effective immediately. INSEE Board of Cosmetic Product Safety." Monica didn't include commentary. She didn't need to. She forwarded the confirmation to Helen with a single subject line, "And still you never raised your voice." Helen read it in the garden, the wind rustling rosemary beside her. Clara was trimming mint, barefoot, humming a tune Helen didn't recognize. The world kept turning gently, but with memory. She folded the email closed, pressed her palm against the warm earth, and exhaled. Lindsay's inbox now held more refund demands than orders. Her Shopify dashboard, frozen, her fulfillment partner, severed ties. Her name, once listed beside top beauty creators on influencer charts, was now a whisper at the bottom of legal disclaimers. She refreshed her mentions. Nothing. She searched her brand's hashtag. Gone. She typed her full name into Google. The first result, founder's license suspended amid ethics inquiry. She closed the laptop. Outside, the world was blooming without her. At first, the delisting happened quietly. A few clicks, a silent purge. Lindsay's product line disappeared from the catalogs of 3 boutique retailers by mid-morning Monday. By Tuesday, a fourth emailed subscribers, "We've removed the Lindsay Glow line pending further review of licensing and product integrity." No press release, no backlash, just absence, like her name had been typed in sand, and someone finally turned on the tide. Lindsay sat at her kitchen counter with a cold cup of coffee and an open laptop, refreshing the vendor dashboards every hour, watching them empty out. Wholesale orders gone. Automated restock notifications silent. Her name, once listed under founder spotlights and innovators in clean beauty, was replaced by words she never thought would appear next to hers. Inactive, flagged, suspended. When she typed Lindsay Glow into Google, the autocomplete no longer pulled up her brand. Instead, Lindsay Glow scandal. Lindsay Glow removed Helen Morris skincare ethics. That one stung worst of all. At the shelter, Bridget walked Helen down the main hallway to the new supply display. The shelves had been redone with soft backlighting and modular bins, each labeled clean and accessible. Above them, a single glass shelf held one framed jar, the infamous prank bomb. Its contents had long since been discarded, but the label remained, peeling, mocking. Lindsay's gold foil initials still visible beneath Helen's red Sharpie block letters. Mounted beneath the frame, a small brass read, "Donated with love. Do no harm." Helen gazed at it for a moment before stepping back. "Why keep it?" Clara asked, walking up behind her. Bridget smiled. "Because reminders help people remember better than lectures ever could." That night, in the quiet of her suite, Helen sat at her desk with the original jar, the one that started it all. She had saved it in the bottom drawer of the old sewing cabinet, sealed in a plastic pouch, like evidence, like memory. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed it in a handcrafted shadow box and affixed a card in her handwriting. "Reminder, I didn't start this, I finished it." She closed the frame, snapped the latch shut, and hung it above her work table. Not as a trophy, but as a boundary. Clara sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching storyboards. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's no docu-series on beauty ethics that talks about this, the personal cost. Elder erasure. Image over integrity." Helen looked up. "You want to make one?" Clara nodded. "Not about the scandal. About the silence. How easy it is to make someone invisible." Helen considered that for a long moment, then said, "Don't use her name." Clara looked surprised. "Why?" "Because her absence is louder now," Helen said. "Let her fade. Let what remains be what matters." The next day, Monica sent an email titled "Legacy over Lip Gloss." "Column series," she wrote. "Your voice, monthly. You decide the pace." Helen opened the draft. Monica had attached a sample layout, clean serif type, warm-toned portrait photography, titles like "The Healing Shelf," "When Quiet Hurts Louder," and "Grace in a Jar." She read every line slowly, feeling something shift beneath her skin. Not pride. Not triumph. Wait. It had taken months. But the space that Lindsay once occupied, on screens, shelves, stages, now bore different fingerprints. Slower, calmer, more deliberate. Her influence hadn't gone viral. It had taken root. Across town, Lindsay stood at the counter of her now empty studio, unplugging ring lights, packing creams that would never ship, staring at the bare wall where her founder portrait had once hung. A package sat on her front step that evening. No return address. Inside was a single item, one of her original jars, label fully removed. A sticky note attached read, "It didn't matter what your name was. It mattered what was inside." She crumpled the note, but the jar remained, empty, like her brand. That night, Helen lit a beeswax candle and sat by the open window, the scent of pine and citrus drifting in from the herb garden. Clara had helped plant. Her email pinged softly. Subject: book proposal. The softest revenge from Brant and Halston Publishing. She opened it. Read the first paragraph. Then again. Clara looked up from the floor, raising an eyebrow. Good news. Helen smiled without showing teeth. Potentially. And she didn't say no. The first thing to go was the shelf. Helen stood in the doorway of the guest suite, her former corner of borrowed space, and stared at the acrylic wall rack that once held jars branded in someone else's name. She didn't flinch as Clara unscrewed it, watching the plastic clatter softly to the floor. Dust curled in the air, and the smell of rosemary and mineral oil still lingered faintly in the walls, but Helen had already made her decision. This time, she said, we're building something with roots. 2 weeks later, the space no longer resembled a guest room. The bed had been replaced with a butcher block work table, every surface sealed and sanded by hand. Rows of amber glass jars glinted beneath the window where sun streamed in. Dried herbs, lavender, calendula, chamomile, hung in neat bundles near the ceiling. Open crates lined the wall, filled with beeswax blocks, dried rose petals, and thick rolls of muslin cloth. Clara stood outside with a paintbrush and a tin of deep sage green. She dipped carefully and began lettering on the door in slow, deliberate strokes. Morris and Grand Remedies, and Respect. Helen watched her through the screen, the sound of cicadas humming in the trees, the smell of paint fresh in the heat. You spelled it right? Helen called. Clara grinned. Of course, but if I didn't, we'll just call it rustic branding. Inside, Bridget co-hosted Helen's first weekly session for the women of the shelter. A folding table was set with oils, carrier butters, and blending bowls. The women circled close, notebooks in hand, but it was the quiet that settled first, an intimacy Helen hadn't expected. They didn't ask for credentials. They watched her hands. You don't need a brand to matter, Helen told them. You need precision, clean hands, and someone who remembers how to listen. Bridget nodded. And a good jar. Everyone laughed softly, but they leaned in. By the end of the month, Gwen had joined remotely, dialing in from her law school dorm on weekends, reviewing content releases and compliance notes. Clara filmed everything with a second-hand camera and edited clips at night, while Helen made labels by hand. Their first community batch was a blend of calendula, comfrey root, and shea. It came from donations, herbs from backyard gardens, oils from a local co-op. They named it together. The way some people name stars Quiet Bloom. Clara designed the label. No bold fonts, no influencer code, no clean beauty slogans. Just 4 words, for the skin that remembered. One afternoon, Connor arrived without warning. He lingered at the workshop door, still wearing his office tie, and an unsure look. Clara glanced up but didn't say anything. Helen was folding gauze strips, her back to the door. Hi, Mom, Connor said. She turned. You came. He stepped inside, running a hand over the smooth countertop. It's different in here. It's mine, Helen said. He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. It's for the grant. No tax write-off. Just contribution. She took it without a word. Her fingers brushed his. I didn't get it before, he admitted. But I think Clara did. Helen glanced at her granddaughter, quiet, focused, peeling labels with steady fingers. She always did, she said. That night, Clara received an email she didn't read right away. She waited until Helen had finished tidying the work table and pouring the last of the balm into a storage tin. Then she opened it. A single line appeared first. Congratulations, you've been accepted into the University of Vermont with full merit scholarship. She scrolled down. The name of her submission essay stared back at her like a quiet echo. The day I watched my grandmother say nothing. Helen looked up from her salve, sensing the shift in Clara's breath. Well, she asked. Clara turned the screen. Helen read, blinked, then smiled, but not wide, just enough for the corners of her mouth to lift, the kind of smile that didn't need words. You're going, she said. Clara nodded. We're both going. Helen cracked the window open just as the morning sun spilled gold onto the hardwood floor. A breeze drifted in, cool and pine-sweet, and with it came the soft scent of rosemary from the garden beds below. The air in the room shifted, less like a house, more like a place meant for recovery, for re-entry, for return. She dipped 2 fingers into a jar of balm. The consistency was perfect, velvety, smooth, the faint scent of lavender and calendula rising without effort. She rubbed it gently across her cheeks, the motion familiar now, no longer cautious, no redness, no sting, only cool, clean skin. Her skin. She closed the jar, placed it back on the shelf among dozens just like it, each labeled by hand, each crafted with intention. None bore a brand name. That had always been the point. Behind her, Clara brushed past, humming some lo-fi melody from her playlist, clipboard in hand, bare feet quiet against the floorboards. Inventory's almost done, she said without looking up. We'll need more almond oil by Friday. And the beeswax is running low. Helen smiled. I'll add it to the co-op list. The space around them smelled like a living apothecary, lavender hanging from the beams, dried eucalyptus crushed under jars, a faint woodsy warmth from the oak cabinet doors. Connor had helped sand down last month. No artificial scent, no sterile gloss. Just honesty. In every direction. The mail arrived with a soft clatter through the slot. Clara went to collect it while Helen rinsed a linen cloth in the sink. Grandma, Clara called from the hallway. You got something from the shelter. Helen dried her hands and took the envelope. The handwriting on the front was careful, like it had been rewritten once or twice. Inside was a folded piece of stationery and a pressed daisy. She read the letter slowly. Dear Helen, they told me your name before I met you, but your silence gave me my voice. Your jars calmed more than skin. They taught me that healing doesn't beg, it builds. Quietly. I'll open my own studio this fall. I'll keep 1 jar on the shelf, so I remember who helped me feel human again. Helen folded the letter back with care, her thumb resting lightly on the paper's edge. She didn't cry. She didn't speak, but something in her spine settled, some weight, long carried, unfastened and set down for good. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Gwen. Gwen, they teach you in school now. You're a case study. Restorative ethics in modern business. The Helen Morris model. Slides and everything. Helen chuckled. A sound so rare Clara looked up. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Some answers lived better in silence. Outside, the garden had started to thicken with color. The chamomile was blooming wild, the bees darting lazily between stems. Clara had labeled the garden beds last week with wooden tags. Healing, hope, quiet courage. Burned then bloomed. Helen sipped her tea from a ceramic mug, Clara made in high school, the rim slightly crooked, the handle too large. It fit her hand just right. Across the room, the framed shadow box sat on the wall. The prank jar still inside, unchanged, untouched. The Sharpie message beneath the label hadn't faded. Do not forget this. Next to it, hung just last night, was a new frame. Inside, the first check from the Resilience Fund, and beside it, a quote card from Monica's column. Legacy isn't built by yelling louder. It's built by choosing not to disappear. Down the road, Lindsay's old office sat gutted, frosted glass, now cracked, signage gone, voicemail box full. Her accounts remained dormant, her name scrubbed from shelves, search engines, press kits, not cancelled, just gone. Forgotten not in protest, but by design. No more jars, no more campaigns, no more filters, just an echo of what once mocked a woman for having skin. Clara stepped beside Helen and rested her head on her shoulder. Do you ever think about her? Helen took another sip of tea. She said it was a joke. she replied, her voice soft but iron-lined. Then she set the cup down, eyes fixed on the shadow box. So I made her legacy the punchline.